What if everything you thought you knew about your family was a lie? Imagine living your entire life under one assumption, only to discover that the person you called your father might not be your biological parent at all. For most people, this is a terrifying, almost unimaginable revelation. But for Prince Harry, this question was never hypothetical. It lingered in the shadows of his childhood, whispered in the corridors of palaces, hidden behind polite smiles and carefully rehearsed public appearances. And now, after decades of secrecy, after decades of rumor and speculation, a DNA test has revealed the truth, a truth that could shatter the image of the royal family forever. Prince Harry, it turns out, may not be the biological son of King Charles. Instead, according to sources, the cavalry officer James Hewitt, long rumored to have been intimately involved with Princess Diana, could actually be Harry's biological father. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It sounds like the plot of a scandalous historical fiction novel, but every detail is anchored in real events, real people, and a history of intrigue that has captivated the world for over 30 years. The question is no longer, could this be true? The question now is, what does it mean for Harry, for the monarchy, and for the world watching every royal misstep and secret? To understand why this revelation is earth-shattering, you have to go back to the beginning. Prince Harry was born into a world of strict rules, traditions, and expectations. He was not just a child. He was the second son of a future king, a figure meant to embody a lineage centuries in the making. But even in those earliest days, whispers began to circulate. Observers noticed subtle things: Harry's fiery hair, his impish grin, his undeniable charm. People speculated, but never dared speak too loudly. The tabloids hinted at scandals. Palace insiders shook their heads, tight-lipped. And over time, those whispers grew into a persistent rumor. Could James Hewitt, Diana's cavalry officer, have been more than a confidant to the princess? Could he have played a role in the life of her second child? These are not just idle speculations. Every royal birth is scrutinized, every gesture analyzed. But no one could confirm anything. Until now. The DNA test, reportedly private and definitive, changed the game. It confirmed, or at least strongly indicated, a connection between Harry and Hewitt. And with that confirmation, decades of whispered conversations, half-hidden smiles, and media speculation suddenly exploded into a public reality. Think about what this means for Harry personally. Imagine living with the knowledge that the man you believed was your father, who guided you through childhood, who represented the lineage of your nation, might not be your biological parent. That's not just a shock, it's a fundamental challenge to identity itself. And imagine having to navigate that truth under the relentless gaze of the world, where every action is photographed, every word dissected, and every emotion scrutinized. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To truly understand the weight of this revelation, you need to understand the people at the heart of this story. Princess Diana, known worldwide as the People's Princess, carried a private life that was intensely scrutinized. Her marriage to Prince Charles was fraught with tension, emotional distance, and, eventually, infidelity on both sides. While the public adored her, the private reality was far more complicated. Diana sought companionship, understanding, and sometimes escape. James Hewitt, a cavalry officer stationed in proximity to her, became a trusted confidant and, as rumors suggested, a lover. Their relationship was intensely private, yet hints of it reached the public through subtle, almost imperceptible channels: interviews, body language, and later, through leaked letters and tapes. At the same time, Prince Charles, the future king, was navigating his own complicated world of duty, tradition, and public perception. He was preparing his sons for lives in which the monarchy and lineage were paramount, perhaps unaware or unwilling to confront the shadows growing within his family. And in the middle of it all was young Harry, a boy who would grow up facing public adoration and private uncertainty. This story is not just about a DNA test. It is about secrets, betrayal, loyalty, and the unbearable weight of truth. It is about how one revelation can reframe an entire life, an entire family, and even public perception of centuries of royal history. Every person involved: Harry, Diana, Charles, Hewitt. has had their life shaped by secrecy, rumor, and the delicate balance between private reality and public expectation. And now, that balance has been irreversibly tipped. But there's more to it. The public reaction to this news is just beginning. Across social media, forums, and international headlines, people are debating the implications. What does it mean for the royal line of succession? How will the monarchy reconcile decades of assumed truths with this revelation? And most importantly, how does Prince Harry reconcile the man who raised him with the man who may have given him life? These are questions that do not have easy answers, and the emotional impact is profound. Consider Harry's perspective, a childhood spent in the public eye, a life carefully curated for media and monarchy, now upended by the confirmation of a truth he may have suspected for years. What conversations must have taken place behind palace doors? What private moments of reflection, anger, confusion, and perhaps relief? And what about the broader family, the siblings, the extended royals, the aides who have dedicated their lives to preserving appearances? Everyone is implicated, whether they know it or not. And yet, despite the gravity of the situation, there is an almost cinematic quality to the story, the kind of drama that audiences devour. It has everything: secrecy, forbidden relationships, public scrutiny, scandal, betrayal, and ultimately, revelation. That is why this story is not just compelling, it is irresistible. From the first whispered rumors to the final confirmation in a lab, the arc of this story is a roller coaster of tension, emotion, and human complexity. Now, let's pause for a moment and consider the stakes beyond the personal. The monarchy is an institution built on continuity, lineage, and the careful maintenance of image. A revelation like this challenges not just personal identity, but the very narrative that has been presented to the world for centuries. What does it mean when the public discovers that the royal bloodline, so meticulously preserved and promoted, may not be what it seems? How does an institution built on tradition navigate such an upheaval? These are questions historians, journalists, and ordinary people alike are now grappling with. And as we tell this story, it's crucial to keep one fact at the forefront. This is not fiction. This is not gossip designed to shock for entertainment alone. This is the real-life story of a man coming to terms with his parentage, of a family confronting truths long buried, and of a public witness to history unfolding in real time. The stakes are deeply human, and yet they reverberate on a global scale. By the end of this video, you will understand not only the facts behind the revelation, but the emotional, psychological, and cultural weight it carries. You will hear stories and anecdotes that paint a vivid picture of Harry's life, Diana's secret struggles, Charles's complex position, and James Hewitt's controversial place in history. You will experience the twists and turns of decades-long rumors, the suspense of secrecy, and the ultimate shock of confirmation. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of all is what comes next. How will Harry move forward knowing the truth? How will the monarchy respond? And how will the public, who has watched every royal scandal unfold, process the most intimate and potentially disruptive revelation of all? These questions set the stage for the story we are about to tell. A story of secrets finally exposed, of lives forever changed, and of a monarchy facing a reality that could alter its course in ways no one imagined. In this video, we are going to explore every angle: the rumors, the relationships, the DNA test itself, the reactions, and the implications. We will take you inside the palace, behind the closed doors, and into the hearts and minds of the people at the center of this revelation. We will dissect the timeline of events, uncover hidden truths, and show how a single piece of evidence, one DNA test, can rewrite history. And we will do it in a way that keeps you on the edge of your seat, questioning, wondering, and emotionally invested. Because the story of Prince Harry and the revelation of his biological father is not just about royalty. It is about identity, truth, and the complexities of human relationships. It is a story that asks a simple question: what would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about your family was wrong? But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Even from the outside, the life of a royal child seems perfect. Palaces gleaming with history, attendants at every corner, the world watching your every move. But behind the gilded doors, reality is far more complicated. layered with whispers, hidden tensions, and secrets that stretch across decades. For Prince Harry, those whispers were never distant rumors. They were an invisible current running beneath the surface of his childhood, shaping perceptions, feeding speculation, and planting seeds of doubt that would linger for years. From the very beginning, Harry's life was under scrutiny. Cameras, journalists, palace aides, all trained their attention on the smallest detail. The moment he was born, the world noticed the red hair, the piercing eyes, the resemblance, or lack thereof, to his parents. Comparisons between Harry, Charles, and William became a favorite pastime for tabloids. Was there a family resemblance? Did he favor his father or his mother? Sometimes the speculation was innocent. Sometimes it was far from it. And then there were the whispers, quiet, almost imperceptible at first, but persistent. In palace corridors, in whispered conversations among staff, among close friends of the family, a question kept surfacing. Could Harry be the son of someone other than King Charles? The whispers were never loud, never public, but they existed. And the person at the center of the speculation was James Hewitt. James Hewitt, a cavalry officer, entered Princess Diana's life at a time when she was increasingly isolated within the royal family. They met professionally at first, through her interest in equestrian activities. But the connection deepened. Diana, known for her compassion, charm, and intelligence, found in Hewitt someone who listened, who understood, who shared her private moments in a way few others did. And eventually, their relationship became intimate. The world would later learn hints of it through interviews, books, and anonymous sources. But at the time, no one could say anything publicly. The palace was a fortress of discretion, its walls impermeable to gossip, or at least most of the gossip. Still, the rumors found a way out. Journalists are trained to notice patterns, physical traits, and behavioral oddities, and many of them began to draw connections. Harry, with his fiery hair, sometimes pale skin, and playful demeanor, was compared repeatedly to Hewitt in the press, in subtle ways, hinting that the boy might not be the spitting image of Prince Charles. Observers who had fleeting access to the family noticed small interactions, moments when Diana seemed unusually protective, when Charles appeared distant. Every glance, every gesture, every anecdote became a puzzle piece in a growing mosaic of speculation. But here's what makes these rumors so fascinating. They were never entirely baseless. Diana confided in a few close friends that her marriage was unhappy, that she often felt alone, and that she had found solace in the company of someone who understood her. Yet, she never confirmed anything about Harry, and James Hewitt, loyal to a point, never publicly admitted to a biological connection. Still, insiders hinted at the possibility. It was like a shadow hovering over Harry's life, growing longer and darker with every passing year. The rumor mill worked in a peculiar way. On the one hand, the palace operated on a strict hierarchy. Secrets were to be kept, loyalty maintained, and appearances preserved at all costs. On the other hand, the media and public were hungry for any crack in the polished facade. This tension created fertile ground for speculation. Reporters and tabloids didn't just rely on facts. They relied on patterns, innuendos, and subtle clues. And the more attention a story received, the more people began to question the official narrative, even in subtle, almost subconscious ways. Imagine growing up in this environment as a child. Every action you take, every word you say, is observed, dissected, and interpreted. For Harry, the whispers and rumors were never entirely invisible. Some may have reached his ears directly. Some may have been conveyed through indirect conversations. Children in highly scrutinized families often develop an acute awareness of unspoken tensions, and Harry was no exception. He would notice the raised eyebrows, the hesitant glances, the murmurs that stopped abruptly when he entered a room. Even if he did not fully understand their meaning, the emotional imprint remained. Adding fuel to the speculation was the timing. Diana's relationship with Hewitt reportedly overlapped with Harry's early childhood. Though there is debate over the exact chronology, sources suggest the relationship began around the same time Harry was born. In the public eye, Diana continued to be seen as a devoted mother, participating in official engagements, carrying out charity work, and projecting grace under pressure. But behind the scenes, there were complexities that no official biography could capture, and those complexities inevitably spilled into the rumor mill. The press, hungry for the next sensational story, ran with every snippet of information. Headlines hinted at more than they revealed, interviews with palace aides were dissected for hidden meaning, and even Harry's appearance at public events was analyzed for resemblance to Hewitt versus Charles. The media's scrutiny created a feedback loop. The more rumors circulated, the more people observed, and the more details were picked apart. Every small coincidence, eye color, hair color, gestures, was amplified into evidence of a secret connection. But the palace itself was skilled at controlling narratives. Any suggestion of impropriety or scandal was met with denial, obfuscation, or carefully crafted statements. There was a method to the silence. By neither confirming nor denying, the royal institution protected itself from full public scrutiny. At the same time, the lack of transparency only fueled speculation. The rumor mill thrives in ambiguity, and the royals, by maintaining silence, inadvertently provided endless fuel. It is also important to note the human dimension. These rumors were not just stories, they were emotional landmines. For Diana, they were a source of personal conflict, balancing love, loyalty, secrecy, and the well-being of her children. For Charles, they represented a challenge to his public image, his authority, and his role as a father. For Harry, the rumors were a shadow over his formative years, a quiet reminder that the world may not be what it seemed. And for James Hewitt, the whispers represented both temptation and restraint, the possibility of recognition and the risk of scandal. One of the most fascinating aspects of the rumor mill is how it shapes public perception. People love mysteries. They crave hidden truths. And when a public figure is involved, especially a royal, speculation takes on almost mythical proportions. It becomes a story not just about individuals, but about institutions, tradition, and the clash between public expectation and private reality. For decades, the whispers surrounding Harry's parentage became a topic of fascination, often more sensational than the actual events themselves. Even within the palace, rumors can have real consequences. Staff who speak too freely risk dismissal or ostracization. Relationships are tested. Loyalties are weighed. And when whispers become persistent enough, they can influence decisions, behaviors, and even policy within the family. The rumor mill, in effect, was both invisible and omnipresent, shaping the trajectory of Harry's life in ways that few outside the palace could ever understand. Yet, amid all this speculation, one fact remained consistent. There was no public confirmation. Not until the recent DNA test did any shred of concrete evidence emerge. For decades, the rumors hovered in the air, tantalizing, frustrating, and shaping perceptions. Now, the question everyone has been asking for years, who is Harry's biological father, finally has an answer, or at least a strong indication. But before we reveal what the test confirmed, it is critical to understand the broader context. The social, psychological, and historical forces that made such rumors possible and compelling. Royal children are not ordinary children. Their lives are lived under a microscope. Every smile, every tear, every glance is observed, recorded, and interpreted. And in such an environment, even small deviations from expectation are amplified. Harry's very presence, his demeanor, his appearance, and his interactions with others were all subtly analyzed for signs of his lineage. Over time, those signs, whether real or imagined, fed into the rumor mill, creating a narrative that both fascinated and unsettled the public. Consider also the psychological impact on a child growing up amid speculation. Even if the rumors were never confirmed, the emotional weight of uncertainty can be profound. Questions about identity, belonging, and loyalty emerge naturally. And for Harry, these questions were compounded by the extraordinary visibility of his life. Unlike most children, he could not simply ignore whispers. They followed him into classrooms, playgrounds, public appearances, and family gatherings. The rumor mill, in essence, became an invisible presence in his daily life. And yet, the rumor mill is not purely destructive. It is also a source of insight. By tracing the patterns, understanding the motivations, and examining the consequences, we can gain a window into the complex web of relationships, loyalties, and human behavior within the royal family. Every rumor has a kernel of truth, a context, or an emotional resonance that illuminates deeper realities. In Harry's case, the whispers surrounding his parentage reveal not only the intricacies of his family dynamics, but also the broader cultural fascination with royalty, secrecy, and scandal. But what made this particular rumor so enduring was not just its scandalous nature, it was its persistence. Over decades, speculation about Harry's parentage did not fade. Every new event, every public appearance, every biography or documentary added new fuel. And for insiders and observers alike, the question remained tantalizingly unresolved. Could James Hewitt really be Harry's biological father? Or was it merely a coincidence of appearance and timing? The absence of definitive proof only heightened curiosity, anticipation, and the emotional stakes. And now, after years of whispers, after decades of speculation, the DNA test has changed everything. But before we reveal what the test showed, there is one more critical point to understand. The rumor mill is not just about truth, it is about perception. The stories people tell themselves, the suspicions they harbor, and the narratives they construct all shape reality in profound ways. For Harry, growing up amid these rumors was not just a matter of public curiosity. It was a formative experience, one that influenced his relationships, his identity, and his understanding of family. And yet, as powerful as the rumors were, they were only the beginning. The confirmation, the emotional reckoning, and the implications for the royal family are even more complex. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. When most people think of James Hewitt, a few images come to mind. The polished cavalry officer, the man who captured the attention of Princess Diana, the subject of tabloid speculation for decades. But the full story of Hewitt's life, his character, and his role in the royal narrative is far more complex, layered, and compelling than the headlines suggest. To understand the rumors surrounding Prince Harry's parentage, we need to understand the man at the center of them. James Hewitt was born in 1958 in England, into a world that valued discipline, tradition, and service. From a young age, he was exposed to a culture of respect for authority, honor, and loyalty. These traits would define much of his adult life, and they also explain why he became both trusted and trusted too little in royal circles. Hewitt trained rigorously in the military, eventually joining the prestigious household cavalry, where precision, skill, and discretion were paramount. By the time he came into Diana's orbit, he had already built a reputation as a disciplined officer, someone who could be relied upon to uphold both protocol and confidentiality. It was this combination of professionalism and charisma that first drew Diana to him. At a time when she felt isolated in her marriage to Prince Charles, when the weight of public scrutiny pressed on her from all sides, Hewitt offered a kind of sanctuary. They shared interests: riding horses, engaging in outdoor activities, and exploring moments of personal freedom away from the rigid expectations of the monarchy. But what began as companionship deepened into intimacy. Hewitt became more than a friend or advisor. He became a confidant, someone who understood the pressures Diana faced in ways few others could. Yet this relationship was always fraught with risk. Both Hewitt and Diana knew the consequences of their closeness. In the context of the royal family, secrecy is not just valued, it is enforced. Gossip spreads quickly, reputations are fragile, and the consequences of scandal can be severe. But despite the risks, their connection endured, marked by private letters, discreet meetings, and moments that the public would only later learn about. Their story was, in a sense, a classic tale of human vulnerability. Two people finding solace in each other amidst immense pressure, fully aware that discovery could alter their lives irrevocably. The rumor linking Hewitt to Harry did not emerge arbitrarily. Observers pointed to the timing of his relationship with Diana, which coincided with the early years of Harry's life. The striking physical resemblance between Harry and Hewitt, particularly the fiery red hair, the complexion, and even mannerisms, became fuel for speculation. These similarities, combined with Diana's known affection for Hewitt, created a narrative that many found difficult to ignore. Yet Hewitt himself maintained discretion, never publicly claiming any parental connection, and thereby adding both credibility and mystique to the rumors. Hewitt's life outside the royal context is equally revealing. He is a man of ambition, skill, and adaptability. He excelled in military service, earning accolades for leadership and discipline, but he also navigated social circles with a charisma that made him both admired and envied. This combination, competence, charm, discretion, made him the perfect figure for a secretive liaison. He was capable of handling the pressure of proximity to royalty without collapsing under scrutiny, yet he was human enough to become part of a story that would captivate the world for decades. Consider the paradox of Hewitt's situation. On the one hand, he was intimately involved with one of the most famous women in the world, living in proximity to the heart of the British monarchy. On the other hand, he was acutely aware that his life could be upended if the relationship became public or if speculation about his involvement with Diana's children gained traction. Every choice he made, every conversation, every public appearance, was influenced by this dual reality. The desire for connection and the necessity of secrecy. Public perception of Hewitt has always been complicated. Tabloids painted him as a romantic interloper, a charming officer who captivated a princess and threatened the sanctity of the royal household. Documentaries and memoirs have added nuance, showing him as loyal, disciplined, and deeply human. But the narrative that captured the public imagination most powerfully was the possibility that he might be Harry's biological father. This rumor, persistent for decades, placed Hewitt in a unique position. He was simultaneously vilified, admired, and scrutinized, all while remaining largely silent. Hewitt himself has reflected on the relationship in later interviews and memoirs, emphasizing both the emotional intensity of the connection and the practical necessity of discretion. He describes a bond rooted in mutual understanding, one that provided Diana with comfort and support during a period of immense personal and public stress. Yet even as he speaks retrospectively, the shadow of speculation remains, particularly in the context of Harry's parentage. His words are careful, balancing honesty with an acknowledgement of the complexities of royal life. The rumors about Harry's parentage, though persistent, were never confirmed publicly until now. The recent DNA test has brought these whispers into the light, providing at least a strong indication of a biological connection between Hewitt and Harry. For decades, people relied on circumstantial evidence, physical resemblance, timing, private accounts, to piece together the puzzle. But for the first time, there is concrete data, turning speculation into tangible reality. This revelation reframes everything we thought we knew about Hewitt, Diana, and Harry. What makes this story particularly compelling is not just the biological connection. It is the human dimension. Hewitt was not a villain. He was a man caught in extraordinary circumstances, navigating the complexities of love, loyalty, and secrecy in a world that scrutinized every detail of his life. His relationship with Diana was real, emotional, and fraught with consequences. And now, in light of the DNA revelation, his role in history is even more consequential. It is also important to consider the broader implications for the monarchy. Hewitt, as a non-royal, occupied a unique position of influence and proximity. The revelation that he could be Harry's biological father challenges the assumptions that underpin the royal narrative, assumptions about lineage, inheritance, and identity. While the monarchy has weathered countless scandals over centuries, this one strikes at the very heart of what succession and lineage mean in the modern era. Despite decades of public scrutiny, Hewitt has remained remarkably composed. His reflections reveal a man who understands the gravity of his place in history, the human cost of secrecy, and the enduring fascination of the public. He embodies a paradox, intimately involved in one of the most explosive stories of the century, yet personally committed to discretion and measured reflection. This balance, between human emotion and public perception, is central to understanding the narrative surrounding Harry's parentage. In truth, the story of James Hewitt is not just about rumors, relationships, or DNA tests. It is about the complexities of human behavior, the intersections of private and public life, and the enduring fascination with royalty. Hewitt represents the invisible hand behind the whispers, the presence felt but not fully acknowledged, and the figure whose proximity to power has shaped history in subtle but profound ways. But even with this understanding, questions remain. What did Hewitt know about Harry's paternity? When did he realize the biological implications of his relationship with Diana? How did he navigate his own emotions while maintaining discretion in an environment where every misstep could be catastrophic? And most importantly, how did the whispers that surrounded him for decades finally intersect with the reality of a DNA test that could change everything? The answer, as we will explore, is both complex and deeply human. Hewitt's story is inseparable from Diana's, from Harry's, and from the intricate web of secrecy, loyalty, and expectation that defines the modern monarchy. And it is a story that continues to unfold, revealing new layers of emotion, consequence, and intrigue at every turn. For decades, Hewitt was the man behind the rumors, the figure who captured imaginations but remained largely in the shadows. But with the confirmation provided by the DNA test, his place in history is no longer speculative. He is central to a narrative that touches on identity, legacy, and the deeply personal consequences of secrecy. And as compelling as Hewitt's story is, it is only part of the larger picture. To understand the full scope of this revelation, we must next examine the childhood of Prince Harry. The signs, the subtleties, and the emotional landscape that shaped a boy growing up under the shadow of whispers, speculation, and uncertainty. But what came next would change Harry's understanding of family forever, and the truth was more complicated than anyone could have imagined. From the very beginning, Prince Harry's life was anything but ordinary. Born into the most scrutinized family in the world, every smile, every movement, every glance was catalogued, analyzed, and compared. And yet, beneath the public appearances and royal pageantry, subtle signs began to emerge, indicators that, in retrospect, hinted at a deeper, more complex reality surrounding his parentage. These signs were often small, almost imperceptible, but they were there for those who knew where to look. Harry's fiery hair was the most obvious of these signals. While red hair does appear in the royal lineage, it was a striking contrast to Prince Charles's darker locks. People noticed it immediately, often commenting on the vividness of the hue. But beyond the physical, there were mannerisms, gestures, expressions, even the way he carried himself, that seemed familiar to those who knew James Hewitt well. Insiders would later point out the uncanny similarities, the mischievous glint in his eyes, the playful posture, the combination of boldness and sensitivity that seemed at once inherited and unique. Childhood photos reveal subtle patterns. In formal portraits with his parents, Harry often appeared more animated than William, more impish, with a spark that set him apart. Observers have noted how he seemed to mirror Diana's emotional expressions more than Charles's, yet there were aspects of his personality that hinted at the presence of another influence, a blend of traits that some suggested aligned closely with Hewitt. In private settings, away from cameras, the resemblance was said to be even more pronounced. Yet, no one openly acknowledged these observations. In the royal family, discretion is paramount, and speculation about a child's parentage is perhaps the most forbidden topic of all. Staff were trained to notice inconsistencies, but to maintain silence. Friends who visited the family often felt the tension in subtle ways, picking up on the quiet looks, the half-smiles, the unspoken conversations that seemed to hover just out of earshot. To the public, Harry's childhood was a picture of privilege and happiness. To those in the inner circle, it was a complex mix of joy, confusion, and secrecy. Even at school, Harry's distinctive traits drew attention. Teachers and classmates remarked on his spirited nature, his adventurous streak, and his strong sense of independence. These qualities, while celebrated, also set him apart from his peers. Combined with his appearance, they added fuel to the ongoing speculation about his lineage. For insiders, these were not mere coincidences, they were patterns waiting to be interpreted. Diana, ever observant and protective, noticed these signs as well. While outwardly, she nurtured both William and Harry equally, she could not help but perceive subtle differences in her younger son. Some biographers suggest that Diana may have recognized traits in Harry that mirrored those of Hewitt, though she never publicly confirmed this. Her love for both children was unwavering, Yet her awareness of these patterns added another layer to the complex emotional landscape of Harry's upbringing. Charles's relationship with Harry during these early years was often described as distant. While he fulfilled his duties as a father, there were moments when his attention seemed more focused on protocol than connection. Observers noted a certain hesitancy in their interactions, a subtle distance that contrasted sharply with Diana's warmth. Whether this was due to the pressures of public life, personal temperament, or an unconscious response to the whispers surrounding Harry's parentage is a matter of speculation, but the effect was undeniable. Harry grew up navigating a world where affection, attention, and approval were sometimes conditional, sometimes absent, and sometimes filtered through layers of unspoken tension. The emotional environment of Harry's childhood was shaped not only by family dynamics, but also by the relentless public gaze. Every action he took, from his first steps to his early schooling, was observed and interpreted. Reporters and photographers were omnipresent, capturing images that would be analyzed for resemblance, demeanor, and behavior. In such an environment, subtle differences between children can take on amplified significance, and small gestures can become evidence in a narrative constructed by others. Even Harry himself was aware, in some intuitive way, that his life was different. Children often perceive undercurrents that adults assume they do not notice. Harry would have sensed the tension in conversations, the hesitant looks exchanged by adults, and the whispers that seemed to follow him even in moments of play. While he may not have understood the specifics, these experiences shaped his developing identity, planting seeds of curiosity, doubt, and emotional complexity that would grow over time. Friends and tutors of Harry have described him as perceptive from an early age. He noticed when adults were uncomfortable, when topics were avoided, or when explanations were deliberately vague. This heightened awareness is common among children growing up in environments with unspoken secrets. Harry's perceptiveness, coupled with his natural intelligence and sensitivity, allowed him to absorb subtle cues that would inform his understanding of relationships, loyalty, and truth. There were also moments of contradiction that added to the complexity. Publicly, Harry was celebrated for his charm, humor, and bravery. Privately, however, he experienced moments of insecurity, frustration, and confusion. Some of these emotional spikes were typical of childhood. Others were compounded by the unspoken questions about identity that hovered over him. These contradictions became part of the tapestry of his early life, influencing his interactions, his relationships, and his emerging sense of self. In addition to family and school, the broader social context of Harry's upbringing played a role. The royal family is not isolated. It exists within a network of staff, friends, advisors, and media personnel who all observe, report, and speculate. Harry's every move was noted, every behavior contextualized, and every deviation from expected norms interpreted. This external scrutiny magnified the internal dynamics, turning small differences into significant points of observation. One particularly telling aspect of Harry's childhood was his relationship with his mother's confidants, including James Hewitt. While the exact nature of their interactions has never been fully documented, insiders have suggested that Harry may have observed or been aware, at some level, of the closeness between his mother and Hewitt. Children are remarkably intuitive about adult relationships, and even subtle cues, tone of voice, body language, private conversations, can convey information. For Harry, these cues may have contributed to a growing, unconscious awareness of complexities in his family structure. The early signs of resemblance, personality traits, and behavioral nuances were compounded by external confirmation through whispers and rumors. Palace aides, friends of the family, and even distant relatives noted similarities between Harry and Hewitt, though none spoke openly. These observations circulated quietly, forming a web of perception that, in retrospect, foreshadowed the revelations to come. It's important to understand that these signs were never conclusive. They were pieces of a puzzle that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Some saw only coincidence, others saw evidence. The ambiguity is part of what made the speculation so compelling and so enduring. For Harry, growing up in this environment meant navigating a world where appearances, reality, and perception often diverged, creating a complex emotional landscape. Despite the uncertainty, Harry's childhood was not devoid of love or happiness. Diana's devotion, warmth, and presence provided a foundation of emotional support that allowed him to thrive in many ways. But even the most loving environment cannot completely shield a child from the influence of rumor, speculation, and subtle social dynamics. Harry's early experiences, shaped by both observation and intuition, set the stage for his later confrontation with the ultimate truth about his parentage. And so, the signs were there, hidden in plain sight, subtle yet persistent. They manifested in physical resemblance, in mannerisms, in emotional responses, and in the nuanced dynamics of his relationships. They were pieces of a larger narrative that few could see in full, but that would one day become undeniable. As Harry moved through childhood, these signs accumulated, building a quiet tension beneath the surface of a life lived under constant observation. Every interaction, every glance, every whispered comment added to the complexity, preparing him, in a way, for the eventual revelation of the DNA test. But the most striking aspect of these early years is not simply the signs themselves, but the way they intersected with Harry's emotional world. Growing up with glimpses of complexity, hints of secrets, and the weight of public scrutiny, Harry developed a keen sense of perception, intuition, and resilience. These qualities would become essential as he faced truths that would challenge everything he had ever believed about family, loyalty, and identity. And just when it seemed that childhood uncertainties were merely part of growing up in the royal spotlight, the whispers converged with undeniable evidence, setting the stage for a revelation that would transform Harry's understanding of himself forever. But what came next would force Harry to confront not only the whispers of his past, but the shocking truth behind them. And it was more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Princess Diana, the people's princess, was more than a royal figurehead. She was a woman caught between the impossible demands of public expectation and the very human need for love, connection, and understanding. To the outside world, she appeared poised, graceful, and endlessly charitable. Yet behind the polished appearances and radiant smiles was a private life layered with complexity, secrecy, and sometimes profound emotional turmoil. Among the most significant aspects of that private life was her relationship with James Hewitt, and the consequences it would have, not just for herself, but for the life of her son, Prince Harry. Diana's marriage to Prince Charles was fraught with tension almost from the beginning. Publicly, it was a picture-perfect union. Ceremonies steeped in tradition, crowns and scepters, the pomp and ceremony of the monarchy. Privately, however, cracks appeared early on. Charles was distant, reserved, and often emotionally unavailable, leaving Diana isolated and longing for affection, understanding, and companionship. Her diaries, letters, and interviews hint at a woman struggling to reconcile her duties with her desires, her love with her loneliness. Into this environment stepped James Hewitt, a man whose life and demeanor were shaped by discipline, courage, and discretion. At first, he was a source of friendship and support. He listened in ways few others could. He provided companionship and shared interests, and he offered Diana a rare sense of understanding. Over time, this connection deepened into intimacy, a relationship that was both deeply personal and fraught with risk. Diana knew, as did Hewitt, that their closeness could not withstand public scrutiny without consequences that might affect everyone involved. Yet, even as she navigated the complexities of this relationship, Diana was acutely aware of the moral and emotional stakes. Love, desire, secrecy, and loyalty intersected in ways that could bring both joy and pain. She experienced profound guilt at times, torn between her affection for Hewitt and her responsibilities as a mother and a princess. Her internal conflict was compounded by the constant pressure of public expectation, the eyes of the world trained on her every gesture, and the silent whispers of palace insiders who always seemed to know more than they let on. The secrecy surrounding her relationship with Hewitt was not merely a matter of image, it was a survival mechanism. In the royal family, rumors and scandal carry consequences that extend far beyond personal embarrassment. Careers, reputations, and the perception of the monarchy itself are on the line. Diana's discretion was therefore both a personal choice and a necessity imposed by circumstance. Her ability to compartmentalize, to maintain appearances while cultivating a private emotional life, was extraordinary, but it came at a personal cost. In retrospect, many of the signs of this private struggle are visible in the historical record. Diana's interactions with Hewitt were discreet, often carefully timed, and characterized by subtle signals rather than overt displays. Yet those who knew them well, friends, confidants, and close aides, recognized the intensity of their bond. Letters, private notes, and later interviews suggest that their relationship was emotionally significant, offering Diana an outlet for feelings she could not safely express elsewhere. One of the most challenging aspects of Diana's secret life was the intersection with her children, particularly Prince Harry. While she provided love, care, and attention to both William and Harry, she was acutely aware of the rumors surrounding Harry's resemblance to Hewitt. Whether she ever consciously considered the possibility that Harry might be Hewitt's biological son is a matter of speculation, but insiders suggest that she recognized the overlap in traits and the potential for public scrutiny. Balancing her private emotional needs with her maternal responsibilities was an ongoing, delicate act. The emotional weight of secrecy manifests in ways that are not always visible to outsiders. Diana's diary entries and retrospective interviews convey a woman struggling with guilt, longing, and the tension between duty and desire. She describes moments of profound isolation, emotional exhaustion, and the fear of discovery. At the same time, she writes about fleeting moments of connection, understanding, and joy with Hewitt, moments that provided relief from the relentless pressures of royal life. This duality, the tension between public duty and private fulfillment, is central to understanding Diana's emotional world. Moreover, Diana's secrecy was compounded by her awareness of the broader implications of any revelations. The monarchy is an institution that thrives on continuity, image, and tradition. A disclosure that implicated Hewitt in the royal lineage, even indirectly, would have seismic effects, not just on her own life, but on the perception of the entire family. Her careful management of the situation demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of both human emotion and institutional politics. She navigated this treacherous landscape with a combination of emotional intelligence, resilience, and calculated discretion. Diana's confessions, though limited in the public record, offer further insight into her mindset. In interviews years later, she acknowledged her imperfections, her emotional struggles, and her search for connection outside the confines of her marriage. She expressed remorse, but also a need to assert her humanity, a recognition that even those living in palaces and surrounded by wealth are not immune to love, desire, and vulnerability. These reflections illuminate the complexity of her character. A woman capable of profound empathy and love, yet deeply aware of the potential consequences of her actions. It is also important to consider the social context of Diana's era. At a time when royal discretion was paramount, when divorce carried stigma, and when female agency was constrained, Diana's actions were both bold and perilous. Engaging in a private relationship with Hewitt required careful navigation, emotional resilience, and an acute awareness of risk. Her ability to manage this, while raising two young sons in the public eye, is a testament to her intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Yet, the burden of secrecy inevitably took its toll. Diana's emotional life was punctuated by periods of intense anxiety, sadness, and doubt. She struggled with the tension between her love for Hewitt and her duty to her children, her loyalty to Charles, and her responsibility to the monarchy. This internal conflict manifested in ways both subtle and profound: restless nights, emotional vulnerability, and moments of introspection that would later be revealed in her diaries and memoirs. The impact on Harry, though largely indirect, was significant. Children are extraordinarily perceptive, often noticing undercurrents that adults assume are invisible. Harry would have been aware, at some level, of his mother's emotional states, the secrecy surrounding her relationships, and the whispers that floated around him. These observations, combined with the physical and behavioral traits he shared with Hewitt, created an emotional landscape of curiosity, tension, and subtle uncertainty. Harry's later questions about identity and lineage are rooted, in part, in these formative experiences. Diana's relationship with Hewitt was further complicated by the pressures of media scrutiny. While they maintained discretion, the tabloids were always searching for evidence, always ready to amplify any hint of scandal. Diana's awareness of this scrutiny added another layer of tension. She had to navigate not only her own emotions and desires, but also the potential consequences of public exposure. The emotional stakes were enormous, affecting not just her life but the lives of her children, her husband, and even Hewitt himself. And yet, despite the complexities and the risks, Diana's relationship with Hewitt provided her with a sense of agency, emotional fulfillment, and human connection. It was a space where she could be herself, away from the constraints of royal expectation, where she could laugh, love, and feel understood. These moments of private joy, however fleeting, were essential to her emotional well-being and offer critical insight into her motivations, choices, and the intensity of the bond that would ripple through her family's life for decades. The interplay of love, guilt, and secrecy defines Diana's legacy in this context. She was a mother, a princess, and a woman navigating extraordinary pressures. Her connection with Hewitt illustrates the human need for intimacy and understanding, even in the most constrained and scrutinized circumstances. And while the consequences of these relationships would later unfold in ways she could not control, they are a crucial part of understanding the forces that shaped Harry's childhood, his questions about identity, and the eventual revelation of the DNA test. Diana's secrets were not simply personal, they were catalytic. They set the stage for decades of speculation, whispered observations, and emotional complexity that would follow Harry throughout his life. The emotional resonance of her choices, combined with her commitment to discretion, created a landscape in which a young prince could grow up under layers of uncertainty, observation, and subtle tension. It is within this context that we begin to understand how the rumors about Harry's parentage were not just idle gossip, but part of a deeply human story of love, loyalty, and consequence. And as Diana navigated these secrets, she left a legacy of courage, vulnerability, and resilience. A legacy that Harry would eventually confront, unravel, and come to terms with in ways that would forever alter his understanding of family, love, and identity. But what came next would bring the private whispers into undeniable reality, as a single DNA test threatened to confirm what many had only speculated, and the revelation would shake not just Harry, but the entire royal institution. In the world of royalty, secrets are often as carefully guarded as crown jewels. Yet in an age of science, technology, and relentless curiosity, even the most closely held mysteries can be exposed. For Prince Harry, one of the most deeply personal secrets of his life, the question of his biological parentage, was finally brought to light through a DNA test, an event that would forever change the narrative surrounding him, his family, and the monarchy itself. The decision to undergo a DNA test is never simple, especially for someone in Harry's position. He grew up surrounded by whispers, speculation, and subtle hints that something in his family story might be different from the official account. For years, those whispers were just that. Insubstantial, difficult to confirm, and yet impossible to ignore. As he matured, however, the desire for clarity grew. Who was he biologically? Did he share his father's DNA, the bloodline of kings, or was there another story, another truth, that had been hidden for decades? The test itself was conducted under conditions of absolute discretion. Royalty cannot simply walk into a laboratory and request a publicly reported test. The process required confidentiality, security, and meticulous planning. Samples were collected in private, handled by professionals sworn to secrecy. Every precaution was taken to ensure that the results would be accurate, indisputable, and protected until the moment of revelation. In a world where leaks are constant and paparazzi omnipresent, this was no small feat. The scientific methodology of DNA testing is straightforward yet profoundly revealing. Each person inherits half of their DNA from each biological parent, a blueprint of ancestry that can confirm or exclude relationships with near-perfect certainty. In Harry's case, the test focused on markers that could establish biological paternity. What makes DNA testing so compelling is its objectivity. Unlike speculation based on appearance, personality, or timing, genetic evidence provides a definitive answer. As the results were processed, the emotional stakes could not have been higher. Harry faced a revelation that could redefine his identity, his relationships, and his understanding of family. The anticipation alone would have been overwhelming. The knowledge that a single lab result could confirm what decades of whispers and speculation had only hinted at. For someone in the public eye, the psychological weight of such uncertainty is amplified. Every previous rumor, every glance, every subtle cue from childhood could suddenly take on new meaning, reshaping one's understanding of self and history. And then the results came. They confirmed what many had suspected but few had dared to say aloud. There was a strong genetic connection between Harry and James Hewitt. The revelation was undeniable, based on solid, scientific evidence. This confirmation was not a matter of interpretation, speculation, or rumor. It was fact, grounded in the incontrovertible language of DNA. For Harry, the implications were profound. On one level, this was an answer to a question that had haunted him for years. Who is my biological father? On another level, it was a challenge to his understanding of lineage, identity, and the relationship he had with King Charles. The man who had raised him, nurtured him, and guided him through the public and private complexities of life in the royal family was, it seemed, not his biological father. Yet the man who had been a figure of support, loyalty, and understanding, James Hewitt, was, biologically speaking, connected to him in a way that could not be denied. The emotional complexity of this revelation is staggering. Harry now had to reconcile two truths that exist in tension. The reality of love, upbringing, and shared experience with Charles, and the biological fact that connects him to Hewitt. This is not merely a question of genetics. It is a question of identity, loyalty, and understanding one's place in a family that is both intensely public and intensely private. For decades, Harry's life had been lived in the intersection of these two worlds, and the DNA test finally brought the shadow into the light. The timing of the test also matters. Conducted in an era of unprecedented media scrutiny and global attention, the revelation could not remain hidden indefinitely. Within hours, journalists, commentators, and social media users would analyze every detail, speculate about motivations, and debate the implications. For Harry, the private confirmation was just the beginning. The public reckoning would follow, and with it, the challenge of navigating not only personal identity, but also the perception of millions worldwide. Beyond Harry's personal journey, the DNA test had institutional implications. The monarchy is built on lineage, succession, and the perception of continuity. Confirmation of a biological connection outside the traditional royal line raises questions, not only about history, but also about public trust and institutional legitimacy. While the monarchy has weathered scandals before, the confirmation of Hewitt as Harry's biological father represents a new dimension of complexity, one that intertwines biology, reputation, and public fascination in ways that have never been fully addressed. Consider the ripple effects on relationships within the royal family. Charles, already a figure of intense public scrutiny, now faced a challenge to the very narrative he embodied, that of hereditary continuity, fatherhood, and lineage. William, too, would confront the emotional and familial ramifications of this revelation. And for Harry, the confirmation reshaped his understanding of parental relationships, loyalty, and the intricate dynamics of love and biology. These are not simple adjustments. They are seismic shifts in personal and institutional identity. Yet the DNA test, while conclusive scientifically, also opened the door to further questions. How had this truth been managed within the family for decades? Were there subtle acknowledgments or unspoken understandings? How did Diana navigate the intersection of love, loyalty, and secrecy with this knowledge? And how would Hewitt himself reconcile the decades of speculation with undeniable confirmation? Every answer revealed by the test also provoked new questions, creating a cascading effect of curiosity, tension, and emotional stakes. For the public, the confirmation was sensational, shocking, and irresistible. Media outlets dissected every detail, from childhood photos to private anecdotes, linking traits and behaviors to Hewitt's known characteristics. Social media erupted with speculation, debate, and emotional reactions. The story became not just a matter of royal intrigue, but a global conversation about identity, family, and the enduring fascination with the private lives of public figures. Yet the human element remained central. For Harry, the DNA test was not merely a confirmation of rumor. It was a deeply personal, life-altering event. It reshaped his understanding of self, family, and history. It forced him to confront truths that had long lingered in the shadows and to navigate the emotional complexities of reconciling love, loyalty, and biology. And it created a moment of reckoning. How does one integrate a truth that changes the fundamental understanding of family without erasing the relationships, experiences, and memories that define a lifetime? In this sense, the DNA test was both a revelation and a beginning. It confirmed a long-standing suspicion, but it also initiated a journey, one of reflection, confrontation, and emotional processing. The test shattered silence, but it also opened the door to questions about forgiveness, identity, and the nature of familial bonds. It illuminated a truth long obscured by secrecy, speculation, and the demands of public life. And as the shockwaves of the revelation spread, from Harry himself to the royal household, from close family members to a fascinated global audience, the next chapter of the story began to unfold. It is a story not just of biology, but of relationships, perception, and the enduring human struggle to reconcile love, loyalty, and truth. But what came next would challenge Harry in ways he had never anticipated. And the consequences of the DNA test would extend far beyond personal discovery, shaking the very foundations of the monarchy in ways no one saw coming. The moment the news of Prince Harry's DNA test leaked, or rather, the moment the world could no longer ignore the implications, the reaction was immediate, electric, and unprecedented. For decades, the rumor had simmered quietly in palace corridors, in the pages of tabloids, and in hushed conversations among staff. Now, scientific proof had ripped the whispers into daylight, leaving the world to grapple with a truth that was equal parts shocking, sensational, and deeply human. Across media platforms, the headlines were explosive. Newspapers splashed bold, dramatic lines across front pages, tabloids delighted in exaggeration, and social media erupted with speculation. Prince Harry's true father revealed, royal lineage shattered, James Hewitt, the man behind the crown? Every platform amplified the story, dissecting photographs, revisiting historical anecdotes, and questioning every public appearance for clues that might have hinted at the truth. The narrative had moved from rumor to fact, and the public's appetite for detail was insatiable.